Hi, I'm Ann Snellgrove McKerracher.
And this is David McKerracher. You're listening to Why Left.
No, this is What's Right.
Oh, sorry. What's right? What's right? You're
You're
right.
listening to What's Right. And today we are joined by Michael Tracey. Welcome to What's Right, not Why Left.
Yeah, great to have you, man.
I'm already confused, but let's just power through.
Let's
Good
just
to be
do
here.
it.
Yeah, so what's right and why left are just two sides of the TU podcast fork. And so we ask the question here, like, what is good, and what and why is a lot of the stuff that we consider good, Ann and I, right coded. But we also, I think, take more seriously than a lot of people that we know certain things that are more popular on the right, and some of that's like pronatalism, for instance, which obviously is also present on the left. So that's not really something that you can just leave to the right or whatever. But you recently in your article here were talking about Jeffrey Epstein, and I also saw your live stream.
Are there people
and
who think Jeffrey Epstein is good?
No, you were talking about it like it's a primarily right wing concern, right? And so so I want to get into that with you because you're kind of talking about this being kind of bogus, and I want to give you a big chance to kind of just unpack all of your stuff from a journalistic standpoint. But for people in the theory tube universe who are less in the political journalism side of things, I just want to say a couple of nice things about you first. And so first of all, Michael and Angela Nagel wrote this fantastic piece after Bernie failed to win the primary in 2020, and that was called "First is Tragedy, Then is Farce." And I think that I was reading that article that year. I also heard you on What's Left back in the day, and so I followed your work on and off since then. Just kind of whenever I see you post something, I'll check it out if I can. And so I was super interested in this, and I think the reason we wanted to bring you on today is because you have a very heterodox opinion. So how about you lay that out for us?
Yeah, so concern or intrigue with Epstein is not an exclusively right-wing phenomenon. However, the reason why it's now re-emerged as a major topic does have to do with the fixation primarily on the right and the expectation that the second Trump administration would somehow reveal all these long hidden secrets having to do with the Epstein saga. And there are so many layers to it that it's hard to know precisely what noun to use to encapsulate it all. I guess saga works. I've also used the word mythology because my contention is that there is a huge mythological component to this Epstein intrigue that really is divorced from the factual record. Now, this doesn't mean that anybody who's ever had a suspicious inkling about Epstein is in the throes of hysteria. Like, I'll freely admit, when it was announced that he had died in his jail cell, I thought to immediately dismiss any suspicions about the circumstances of that as a conspiracy theory were ridiculous, because it was manifestly a peculiar set of circumstances, right? And while I'm not going to sit here and proclaim with 100% certainty that he killed himself, there has been a rash of additional investigation, inquiry, information, facts that have come out in the subsequent 6 years that I would say likely do militate toward that explanation.
Mm.
Now, why would I focus on the right wing fervor around Epstein in particular? Because, again, that's why we're talking about it right now. We're talking about it because of the reaction to the Trump administration putting out, or the Trump DOJ and FBI putting out a memo on the Sunday evening of 4th of July weekend declaring that after a systematic review, there was no evidence for, as they put it, a quote, incriminating client list. There was no evidence that there was a blackmail operation. And that memo, I even chastised anybody who would continue to propound unfounded theories around Epstein.
At that point.
And yeah, well, at that point, or maybe even at any point, I'm not sure. It wasn't really even specified. And that created a giant uproar amongst elements of the right wing online ecosystem. And I guess the right writ large, if we can understand the online reaction to be representative of right wing opinion writ large, although that's always a bit of a dicey extrapolation to make. In fact, one thing that I've noticed is that in recent months, right wing opinion, as evidenced by like whatever we're served up with algorithmically on social media, is taken as representative of like the broader Republican coalition in a way that I think is a little bit unfounded and is an over extrapolation or over interpretation of social media, which was a phenomenon that I would have more associated with the left in recent times. Meaning, extrapolate from whatever you see on social media as indicative of the sentiments that are most operative within like the Democratic coalition or the left wing liberal left political sensibility. Now I think there's sort of like an inverse happening with the right to some degree. So people think that the Epstein issue is going to splinter or divide or imperil Trump's support base, and they conclude this based on the fact that there are a lot of right-wing influencers, quote unquote, who are up in arms about this, who have been critical of Trump. Actually,
who are the
somewhat
biggest
astonishingly,
ones? The biggest ones that come to mind would be Tucker Carlson, probably, right?
yeah, that's one. You know, Megyn Kelly has been critical of mostly. I mean, the ones that have most proximity to Trump himself tend to direct their criticisms at Trump subordinates. I mean, this is what they've always tended to do because they don't want to get in a situation where they're being that critical of Trump directly. So, like, they criticize. Now the scapegoat primarily is Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. So you know, Charlie Kirk, Laura Loomer, people with just various podcasts and things. I mean,
Kirk is
it's a whole
critical.
grab bag. He's been critical of the handling of aspects of the Epstein issue. Obviously, he's always careful to hedge and not attack Trump directly.
Okay,
But
because Shapiro's over here just like, well, this is old. Why does anyone care? Come on, everyone, move on.
yeah, I would put Ben Shapiro in kind of like a slightly different category. Like his identity was not singularly crafted around, and neither was Megyn Kelly's, in fairness, singularly crafted around like fidelity to Trump.
Okay.
Whereas Charlie Kirk more so was. Laura Loomer definitely.
Hmm.
Laura Loomer's been on a rampage against Pam Bondi. I mean, I actually enjoy Laura Loomer. She calls, she's just like, there's something amusing and almost inspiring about her doggedness. Like she calls Pam Bondi now Scam Blondie, which I think is pretty clever. And so, I mean, and you see this sentiment reflected like just in social media commentary overall, like the comment section. Trump was like ratioed, quote unquote, on his own platform, Truth Social, for the first time over the weekend when he posted a long screed saying, "Stop wasting time on Jeffrey Epstein. Nobody cares." And sort of reprimanding his quote guys and gals, meaning I guess this sort of coterie or universe of influencers who have been fixated on the story now for 10 days after the memo came out. And so, that's why I'm speaking it, I guess, primarily as a right-wing phenomenon at the moment, although it's not exclusively a right-wing phenomenon. I would say that the right wing component of it is most kind of newsworthy and relevant right now, and has distinct features that contrast with the more left-wing variant. So
Okay.
the right wing phenomenon more intersects with like these, as I put it in one of my articles, like turbulent grassroots Christianity, where they always sort of need there to be this systemic cover-up going on of child sex trafficking rings and pedophilia to sort of infuse their political engagement with like some with like energy and vigor and like a crusading type instinct to save the children. And it's interwoven with like inferences of Satanism and elite depravity that is like fundamentally demonic. Whereas there's a left-wing variant that kind of gets more filtered into like NGOs. There are right-wing NGOs too that focus on like sex trafficking or child sex trafficking as well. But the left-wing variant kind of, or liberal variant, more focuses on child sex trafficking as a function of power imbalance, oppression of marginalized groups,
Right.
hierarchy, and that sort of thing. But interestingly, they do tend to converge on the same endpoint, which is this fervent conviction that child sex trafficking is everywhere, and we're damned or indicted as a society for not focusing on it more and not holding perpetrators to account. Epstein is sort of a manifestation of this. Like the right wing had a similar narrative that they were invested in during the first Trump administration, which was the QAnon phenomenon. Then during the Biden administration, it sort of morphs into this Epstein and this idea that the decadent Democrats, depraved Democrats, are covering for their donors and friends who are implicated in the Epstein saga. And now, like we've had a plot twist, and the claim is that the Trump administration is actually covering up this sex ring. Now, QAnon and Epstein are different in that there's an actual factual predicate to the Epstein phenomenon. Like Epstein was a real person. It wasn't just like this confabulated trolling thing that manifested online where you had to like read coded messages to understand like where the adventure was going next.
Right.
There's a lot more factual, concrete details to Epstein, which is in part why it makes it more of a widespread belief, and you have the insinuations of some kind of intelligence connection, etc. So, and we can get into all that. I don't just flatly declare the entire thing to quote be bogus. I guess here's how I would distill my thesis, and then I'll end.
Yeah, those were not the words you used, to be fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that a large percentage of what people ascribe to Epstein as this phenomenon that they're so overwroughtly concerned about, a large percentage is exaggerated and exists in the realm of mythology. And like here's basically what people believe, right? And correct me if you think I'm wrong. The reason why people are so outraged is because they fervently believe that there was a large-scale child sex trafficking operation, a pedophilic sex trafficking operation, in which Epstein trafficked minors to prominent individuals across many industries and business, government, academia, and so forth, philanthropy. And that Epstein then blackmailed those individuals and toward to some end that's not really well defined. A lot of people suspect it's to do with Israel or CIA or some combination, and that's all been covered up. That's what people tend to believe, right? That's like an approximate distillation of what people believe is being covered up and why they claim to be so outraged. And my contention is that belief is not well founded in the facts. And so does that therefore mean that I'm just flatly declaring everything associated with Epstein bogus? No, I mean, it's a salient issue for understandable reasons. There are some, a variety of, mysterious aspects to it that people that for 10 years, media outlets have been covering ferociously. There's been reams and reams and reams of litigation that has uncovered a whole variety of facts if people actually want to obtain them, etc. So that's, I guess, the distillation of my view on Epstein. And also there's another component here, which is that it's been politically operationalized primarily by the right recently.
Right.
To gin up a fervor, or to gin up anticipation or excitement to vote for Republicans in 2024. And then the deep state, quote unquote, would be defeated. And by natural extension of that, the Epstein files, quote unquote, would be released.
Right.
And so I think that was a clever political tactic on the part of Republicans, but it also didn't necessarily lend itself to any sort of rational apprehension of what the story here really was.
Okay, that's great. So I think when we come back after this little PSA we're about to run here on the stream. And by the way, folks, if you're watching this live, go ahead and say hello. Let us know what you think about all this. We've got a few people in the chat who've done so already. What's up, Brian Walsh, Caravaggio, Recovering Anarchist. Good to see you here. And we'll be right back right after this. But before I go, I just want to say, Ann and I, in our private conversations, we're like, everyone's a pedophile until proven otherwise. Exactly. If they're in power, you're a pedophile until proven otherwise. And this is not a trap. Michael knew he was coming in on a podcast where we just assume that. But we'll come right back with why we think so, or why we think that that's reasonable, at least, because basically you just laid out what people believe, and we'll say why we think it's reasonable, and then we'll let you kind of dismantle it from your position. But
okay.
We'll be right back right after this, folks. Hate to interrupt, but we would be remiss to not share an advertisement from our sponsors. And we're not sponsored by any corporate or state entities other than ourselves. So I'll just tell you a little bit about some of the past courses and the ongoing courses here at TU. Because if any of them sound exciting to you, well, you can access all of them by becoming a subscriber. That's right, subscribers make all of this possible. Subscribers get access to the course I taught on Martin Heidegger's Being and Time, as well as the course that I taught the first half of last year, Emmanuel Levinas's Totality and Infinity, the second half for which I will be teaching this winter. I've also taught critical media theory and critical doxology and time energy with my wife, Ann Snellgrove McKerracher, who is the co-host on What's Right. Also, you would get access to the course I taught at the university, 3 semesters worth, on Intro to Critical Social Theory and Socioanalysis. But also, we've had lots of other great professors teach Introduction to Marxism by Chris Cutrone, Intro to Lacan via Seminar 11 with Todd McGowan, Introduction to Ivan Illich with Brian Weeks, The Clinical Structures of Psychoanalysis and Autism with Dr. Leon Brenner, the Michael Downs Seminar, Introduction to Slavoj Zizek, Introduction to Nick Land, and Zizek's For They Know Not What They Do, all taught by Michael Downs, as well as What is Sex? There was a collab that I did with Cadell Last, Theory 101, a collab I did with Hello Gorgias. And then also, of course, there's Carl Jaspers' is The Idea of the University, PMC Consciousness and Ideology. These were early, very important courses that I taught with friends at TU back in 2023. And they remain important to this day. Every one of these courses comes out of an overarching research project. There's a real driving force, mission, and agenda to the research going on at TU because we want to understand the situation for the sake of large-scale structural change focused on the good life. What does that actually mean? If you really want to go deep, obviously, these courses are something you could spend the better part of a year binging while at work. Ongoing courses that come out on a monthly basis are the Fundamental Problems and Core Concepts at TU with yours truly. Also, my seminar, Philosophy of Nature with Nina Power, the Benjamin Studebaker seminar, as well as his course, The 12 Political Theorists. We've got some really exciting stuff coming down the line. The only way to make this all possible and really deepen your knowledge and familiarity with all of these different things is to become a subscriber today at http://theoryunderground.com/subscribe. Thank you. We're back. Welcome back, Michael. So, Anne, assuming you're not back yet, I'll just launch into how I think about it. So on the back end here, we were just talking about how this PSA we're running, it's about the courses and stuff like that. And Michael was like, do you teach a course on how everybody's a pedophile? And I said, no, but I should. And I said I would have to call it critical political epistemology, right? Playing off of social epistemology, which, takes this approach of like, how do we know stuff? Why do we trust things? And you take the airplane as the first perfect example. So people today don't sit around doing what Descartes was doing, questioning whether he exists and then building back from first principles. What we do is we get on airplanes, and no one person knows how to build an airplane from scratch. Or even probably even understands the whole thing as an engineer. It's like different people understand different parts. You are trusting a body of science and technology when you get into that airplane. And so a critical political epistemology would be asking things like, what are the criteria that we use for adjudicating when, whether, or how to trust? And so I'll just say the basic part here is like, when you say that people who are concerned about this issue are primarily, you said, correct me if I'm wrong, they believe that there's a large-scale sex trafficking network that is being used to collect blackmail on various influential people for
a child sex trafficking network specifically. Yeah.
Okay, child sex. Okay.
What is that not what you think? Is that not what you understand people to believe?
Yeah, I'll expand on it in a second, but I'll say, to finish the thing, just blackmail for CIA crime networks, or Mossad is also a popular one now. And so I would expand it to say, I think that most of the people that I've heard talking about this, it's not specifically child trafficking. It involves that as one of the things, but the idea is that what these people do, these blackmail brokers, who work for intelligence agencies, is they get you whatever it is that you're into, whatever it is that you would be most ashamed about. So it's either that you're into it and you would be ashamed or embarrassed if it were to come out, or it could undermine your future opportunities, or they just need you in some compromising position. And so if they really need to have you in a position where they can trust you somewhat, then they have to have you do something that will compromise you. And so it might not even be that you're actually into the thing that you're doing. They just need you to, let's just say you're Ted Cruz. Well, we're going to have you doing a Heil Hitler atop a dead body with like blood all, like some child blood sacrifice.
Okay, but that seems pretty far afield to me from the Epstein issue. I mean, the Epstein issue, I thought the reason why it's so inflammatory and why it generates such hyper emotional reaction is specifically because of the child sex trafficking component, right?
That's the most troublesome part of it. And when I talked to, for instance, a person at the farmer's market last week, she's like this homeschool mom, very nice lady. She always comes and buys some of our vegetables. And she was like, oh yeah, this Trump thing is so shameful. They need to go after these people. For her, it is purely about the child sex trafficking, and she's thinking this is primarily about Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew's,
right?
Prince Andrew and
Bill Gates. I mean, that's what people have been ginning.
That's
what people on the right primarily have been ginning up for years.
Right. So that is her main focus.
Using as a tactic to entice or tantalize prospective voters to vote Republican.
Right.
And I admire that as a savvy political or electioneering tactic. I mean, I think it's effective. I think it's effective insofar as it's potent, or it allows certain demographics that otherwise would not be amenable to traditional political messaging to be reached. And these demographics tend to predominate in online alternative media type circles, social media, etc. These are not people who really want to hear a treatise on tax policy so much as they want their deepest, darkest projections about the nature of the corrupt, like left-wing elite to be vindicated, and for Trump and the Republicans to be these heroic saviors who are going to bring all these pedophilic criminals to justice. I mean, Dan Bongino, now the deputy FBI director, basically said exactly that.
Wait, did they really make him that the deputy? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's the deputy. He's the deputy FBI director.
I didn't know that.
And when he was his previous job was a podcaster and host on Rumble, where he made exactly this argument. And so to some degree did Kash Patel, who's the FBI director, who would go around to podcasts between 2021 and 2024 and say, look, the quote unquote list, it's sitting on the FBI director's desk right now, but they're so adamant about protecting their Democrat friends that they're concealing it from the public.
Right.
He said, there's a quote where he says, put on your big boy pants and tell us who the pedophiles are.
Right.
Now, who do you think he's referring to? He's not referring to Donald Trump. He's referring to Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, etc. Anybody who's
and the Biden administration. Right.
I don't know if they were accusing Joe Biden of consorting with Epstein, but they were accusing, the Democratic power structure of concealing this information. Right. Would implicate these left-wing demonic pedophiles, because that's consistent with what people like right-wing, the id of right-wing social media has to perpetually believe about how the nature of power and how it's distributed in society. Left-wing satanic elites, in concert with the Democratic Party, are constantly covering up a pedophilic sex trafficking ring.
But
because that explains how basically power is organized in society, which is why there's such a crisis of confidence now, or there's like people don't know what to believe anymore, because they're now led to believe that Trump is himself participating in the cover-up.
Yeah, here's the thing though, Michael. Why? Okay, it's a populist issue, and that the populists would care about it regardless of whether the left populists or the right populists were primarily taking it up at the time. And I think you're correct that the right-wing populist approach has this particular, like, oh, it's Satanist. This is definitely like Candace Owens. She likes to call everything satanic. But that I think the role and function for responsible intellectuals who are in these populist times is to say, one, yes, there's great reasons that people don't trust those in power. Two, sometimes there will be people who take that to an extreme and it will sound really stupid. Three, we shouldn't take those fringe or extreme narratives to be the core thing, which is the distrust. And then finally, if we say, well, what's plausibly going on here? We know historically, I think you could probably agree with this without me having to pull receipts and go deep into it, that the CIA, Mossad, intelligence agencies with other countries as well, like this is a thing that they do. This is also a thing that the mob does, that there is a history of blackmail networks, and that this isn't just in modernity. This spans the history of humanity. Wherever there is power, wherever there are elites or aristocracies, there are weird things that go on. And whenever there are revolutionary or turbulent times, people, when they grab their pitchforks, they say they're bad for whatever the thing is that we dislike the most. And that there's always some truth to it. And the question here is, how much of it is true. And we should be able to know. There should be some kind of an investigation. And right now, Trump's just kind of going, oh, why are we still talking about this? Well, you ran on it, dude. So that's why they're talking about it. But outside of the fact that they're talking about it, you also know a lot of the people who are implicated by this. And so even if it's not true that he's a blackmail broker, well, we should be able to find out. There should be an investigation, though.
I of course do not disagree that there's ample reason to distrust people in power. That's not the issue. The issue is how that manifests in certain segments of society. If you want to call them populist, okay, I think it's kind of a mark against the rationality of populism if it just is perpetually manifesting as a belief that the elites are organized around their insatiable appetite for pedophilia. Even if you can find, instances where that is the case over the years, I'm not denying that either. But I'm looking at the Epstein thing on its own terms. Like, if you want to talk about the great span of history going back to the dawn of humankind, okay, but again, that's getting a little bit far afield from the discrete issue of the Epstein matter. And I think, for one thing, it amazes me, although it shouldn't, and maybe I'm not even amazed, maybe I'm exaggerating. I can't fail to note that core prongs of this Epstein mythology are just not based on sound evidence. Like, for instance,
this is what I was hoping you'd get into. Yeah, please.
The primary, most high profile, most influential accuser from whom this entire mythology essentially flows, who was the progenitor of it, Virginia Giuffre, is, I'm sorry to say, and I know people are going to get angry when I say this, and I know the comment sections everywhere I've talked about this issue for the past 10 days are 99% against me, which is fine. I guess that's indicative of this populist sentiment. But this person, again, who is the chief mythologist, essentially, and the reason why people are invested in the story and it exploded into what it became, Virginia Giuffre, is just a serial fabulous. I can't imagine anybody who is less credible or reliable to serve as the foundation for this all-encompassing belief system as to how power in society is organized. She became a professional victim as well. We talk about populism. I don't know. She became a multi-millionaire because she decided that her job was going to be a professional full-time victim, quote unquote, where she got something like probably $15 million. And I think that's probably a low estimate over the course of the past 10 years of accusing anybody she possibly could with pedophilic sex crimes, some of which she had to humiliatingly retract. One of the two people that she specifically accused when she initially joined ongoing litigation at the end of 2014 that stemmed from the plea agreement that Epstein obtained in Florida, whereby he would not face federal charges if he agreed to this plea agreement and would have to plead guilty to state level prostitution charges. That then led to purported victims of Epstein filing claims against the FBI that they had not been adequately notified of a settlement. And Giuffre had her lawyers make a filing in relation to that litigation. And one of the people that she made her flagship claims against, claiming that she had been sex trafficked to him, I think on 6 separate occasions, was Alan Dershowitz, who, look,
right.
I don't agree with Alan Dershowitz on a lot of things, but that's not the issue. The issue is that from the very moment that charge was made against him by Giuffre in a court filing, he adamantly denied it. He said, look, he requested that the FBI investigate him. He requested that every piece of evidentiary material be released because he was absolutely insistent that he would be exonerated. And people ridiculed him and laughed at him. And finally, 8 years later, over the course of this very convoluted litigation where Gouffre sued him for defamation because he said that she was a liar, etc.
Mm-hmm.
The resolution to that litigation finally was Gouffre admitting she had falsely accused him. So, like, what would redound to her discredit? What would show that she is not a reliable narrator of these events, if not that? And that's just one element of this fabulism. You know, she claimed she.
So you don't agree then that she was sued into silence?
Sued into silence by who?
By Alan Dershowitz.
No, she hasn't been silent at all. She generated a juggernaut of publicity over the course of a decade. She had some of the most high-powered attorneys working on her behalf, like the David Boies law firm. These are some of the most high-powered attorneys in the world, literally, who are extracting huge amounts of money on the basis of their representation of Gouffre. Student to silence. No, she was constantly making these claims everywhere she possibly could. And
well,
she wasn't silenced at all.
I don't tend to trust Z Squirrel on X, but Z Squirrel had said that, and I don't know. I never got to.
She was sued into silence. She was never. When was she silenced?
Yeah, see, I don't know. But you're saying she retracted the claims that Dershowitz had done these things. So
yeah, because they were unsustainable by the evidence. That's not an example for being sued into silence.
So
she hasn't been silent at all. She was never silent.
So
she created a cash cow. She created a feeding frenzy where, I mean, talk about populism. Okay, I guess now it's populist for all these money-grubbing feeding frenzy lawyers to make a bonanza on any claim that they can tie to Epstein the most tangentially. So, suing JP Morgan, suing Deutsche Bank, coming to a settlement in the U.S. Virgin Islands, suing the Epstein estate, where anybody who can claim anything essentially gets millions of dollars, and the lawyers take an astronomical percentage.
Sure.
So, what's the populist like upside there exactly? I mean, I don't know what people are even
I'm totally on board here with the idea that professional victims and then there are lawyers who profit by working with
these
them
same people
claim
to be skeptics of the NGO complex. The NGO complex is like subsidized by claims exactly like this. Virginia Gouffre, this like cardinal accuser, had her own like sham NGO that she somehow managed to get funded by the British royal family. And it didn't do anything. Like the claim is that it raises awareness about sex trafficking. What awareness did it raise? There's like no record of it ever doing anything substantive to help really anyone other than Virginia Gouffre to serve as like a portal for her media activities. And she was like she was able to purchase these luxurious oceanside mansions in Australia. She had a beautiful ranch that she purchased. She had all these properties. She was living a life of luxury.
So I want to bring Anne in on this. I know she's back now because she said something in the chat, but we don't even know anything about Gouffre, so thank you for sharing all of this. I know you wrote about it and I heard you talk about it on your stream, but now you've shared it with folks here. I didn't realize she's like one of the main people or whatever, because
she's the
all I knew is that there's over 1,000 victims, and that's confirmed by the DOJ and the FBI, and this has been reported on. Okay, so I just pulled up to see who's reported on this, and it's not just Fox News; it's also ABC, NPR, CBS, The Guardian, USA Today. All of this year have reported that there are over 1,000 victims, and it's like so. It's like that's not just Gouffre, but I know you have a comeback to that. But everyone will get to it. But Anne, you've been concerned, and so let's hear a little bit about.
I guess
your thoughts.
Because I haven't done, I think, the research that either of you have done onto your corresponding perspectives on this. I think I just have some questions that I'd love to hear. I mean, you especially, Michael, but even Dave, if you have anything on just like, okay, whether or not this was as big as it was blown out to be, it's like, what the hell happened? Like, okay, I didn't know who Epstein was until I'm hearing, oh, Epstein, he's dead. Like when, back in what, 2019, 2020, when all of his trial and indictment and then his suicide or not suicide went down, and that there was a lot of suspicion around that. Oh, why'd the cameras go out? So you're like, okay, interesting, suspicious. You see, yeah, Dave was just mentioning these 1,000+ victims, Maxwell being
Right.
involved in all of this. And yeah, the Justice Department, the FBI, the DOJ, like in federal investigations saying there's 1,000 victims in sex trafficking, not necessarily that there's this elite connection, but then the Trump administration and conservatives saying, oh, yeah, we have this client list. It's on my desk. We're going to release it. And then all of a sudden, Musk goes, oh, yeah, Trump's not going to release the list because his name is on it. And then poof, it's gone. Like from
Yeah.
someone
Yeah,
who
like
doesn't
weeks
know very
later.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I mean,
from someone who,
yeah.
let me just really quick, from
Mhm.
someone who doesn't know as much, but who is just, I think, as Dave mentioned, just like suspicious and untrusting of the government and of the elites on both sides, point blank. That all is very, very suspicious to me. And so I
I
guess
totally
like
get that. Yeah.
what's the angle then? Like I feel like the Trump administration and Trump himself is not dealing with this very well from a PR perspective. It's like there is no better way to make people go like suspicious of you by going, "Why are we talking about this guy? What are you talking about? The list doesn't exist," after being accused of basically being a pedophile participating in this. So
Yeah.
it just all doesn't seem like it's helping anyone. And I guess I'm just like, so then what does explain all of this if it's not that there actually was blackmail network of child sex trafficking that all these elites were getting in on? Why would they say there's a list and then say, "Oh, JK, what list?" I guess it's just all very suspicious.
I totally get all that. I totally get, I should say, your suspicions as somebody who has not, as you freely acknowledge, done any kind of extensive research or reporting on this issue. I wouldn't expect the layperson or the average person to do that. What they're going to generally do is just pick up on these sort of titillating tidbits, right? And form kind of preliminary conclusions or inferences based on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, of course, yeah, it's been a PR debacle for the Trump administration, no doubt, which kind of culminated in that screed that Trump posted over the weekend, where,
Yeah.
again, for the first time, he got ratioed on his own social media platform, Truth Social, because like all these people are like, they
He
like the
was like,
one line that cannot be crossed for them is like pedophilia rings, right?
he was like,
He's
"Where's my
saying, forget
boys?
about it.
Where's my girls? What?" He was like,
Yeah,
"What?" He was like, "What are my
my
children doing?" Yeah.
he said, what's going on with my boys, and in some cases gals?
Yeah.
Which
That
I mean,
was
I thought
so
was hilarious.
ridiculous.
So yeah, I grant all that. I mean, it's a PR catastrophe for them, but it's of their own making, I would argue. It's of their own making, not so much Trump himself, really. It's not like Trump himself would go around pledging to unveil the Epstein files. Like he would occasionally be asked about it. And would get kind of like non-committal answers. He would say, "Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe we'll look into releasing them, whatever." But it wasn't like a huge issue. It wasn't like a huge topic that he would bring up on his own volition. It was more people in the right wing MAGA ecosystem who would bring it up, like a Kash Patel, like a Dan Bongino, and others just in the media sphere. Um, in terms of the Elon Musk thing, yeah, I mean, that was like Elon Musk went nuclear on Trump essentially when they had their big blow up. When, like, within a matter of hours, he got so crazed that he posted that tweet saying Trump won't release the Epstein files because he's in them. Okay, so again, to the untrained eye, that sounds salacious, right? Trump is in the Epstein files. Whoa, what does that mean? Well, it depends on what you mean by the Epstein files. Like, that's never been some like consolidated list of sex traffickers, right? It's a whole universe of files that have, some of which have been released over the course of a decade of litigation on this issue. And we've already known that Trump has appeared in, quote, Epstein files, because it's factually established that he was a social associate of Epstein for like 10 or 15 years, from roughly the late 80s to the early 2000s. That he flew on Epstein's jet, etc. So like there is, there are flight logs that have been uncovered as a result of litigation that have Trump's name on them because he flew on Epstein's jet. Like, that's not even disputed. So when Musk says that Trump is in the Epstein files, like in a certain sense, that's like trivially true. Like, that's already been known. But like, most people don't follow this issue that in depth. So when they hear that, they think that there's some like explosive material that's yet to be uncovered and that Trump is concealing, which is why they won't release the quote unquote Epstein files. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess there's like a more banal explanation to a lot of this than people would probably be led to believe if they're just picking up on these sensational tidbits here and there. And so I do think that it's worth,
like, for instance,
if you want to condemn anybody,
were there
just last point, like if you want to condemn anyone, here's what I've been arguing. Yes, condemn the Trump administration for making their own bed and now having to lie in it, in the sense that they ginned up this anticipatory frenzy and are now being perceived to fail to deliver and being party to the supposed cover-up, because it was in the political self-interest of a lot of these people who have been associated with the Trump administration and were like in the media domain previously, and so had it as like a commercial or political interest to fan these flames based on a very hazy factual predicate. So I chalk it up more to like political charlatanism than I do to now there being another dimension of a pedophile cover-up that's emerging.
Now, I wanted to have you on What's Right here because I didn't want to have 2 versus 1, you and Benjamin Studebaker both being on the side of this is ridiculous or this is a waste of time, or Benjamin's approach is a little different than yours. And so, we're still, Anne and I are going to have a hopefully a separate conversation with him because his is like, this is a distraction. It confuses people, and it's about corruption and morality. And anytime that you focus on corruption or morality, you're not doing real politics. And so can we get back to real politics? And that's where I'm like, well, that feels more like this is being made into this is a Monica Lewinsky kind of scandal or a Watergate scandal. This is more of, but the implications of this one to me seem unique. And for me, this, and also the idea that this comes, this goes, these kinds of things come and go. This seems like the case of the century from where I'm at, but this is going back to when he killed himself in 2019. And I'm not saying he didn't, though I'm obviously wondering about the cameras on the cell block being down, being understaffed, him being taken off suicide watch 7 days after his first attempt. That's where it's like, even if he did kill himself, that's gross negligence, of course. But just
that's plausible. Gross negligence. Right. I mean, would you be shocked to hear that there's gross negligence in the Federal Bureau of Prisons?
But when it's such a high profile criminal, gross negligence, it's you know what I mean? It's like, is it gross negligence, or is that a really convenient?
Well, Dershowitz says that he suspects that Epstein could have like paid off guards or something to, again, take him off suicide watch. I mean, there is a protocol where like you're not supposed to stay on suicide watch for that long because like you're wearing this protective matted clothing or whatever it is, or heavy clothing, so you can't twist your shirt into something, or like you have nothing and there's like nothing in your room other than Yeah, so you're not supposed to stay on it for extended periods of time according to Bureau of Prison Protocol, etc. Um, the cameras were not operational, is my understanding. You can read like a 350-page report on this. I mean, there's like plenty of material out in the public domain that people can actually go through if they really want to. Some people don't seem to want to. They would rather just like conjure the most fantastical explanations in their heads.
Right. Well,
But
a lot of this stuff is kept from the public eye, like the Ghislaine Maxwell court proceedings. So we only have a lot of the things that come up in it are redacted.
That wasn't kept
like
from the public.
well, the book that
trial.
comes, the book that was brought in that was it's not a client list, it's an address book or whatever. The black book, the government artifact number 52 or whatever, that was heavily redacted.
But pieces of that have been
right?
out. I mean, this is another sort of misconception, I think.
Yeah.
Ghislaine Maxwell had a public trial. She pleaded not guilty. She was convicted.
But she was convicted,
right, on the basis of the testimony of 4 self-identified victims. Amazingly, the government, or the judge rather, allowed those victims to testify with fake names in the trial. So that gave the impression to jurors that their right to privacy somehow as victims superseded Maxwell's right to a fair trial. Because, I mean, think about it. If you're on trial for something and your accusers are all anonymous,
that's
then
crazy.
that inhibits your ability to cross-examine. And that's a huge civil liberties infringement, I think. And that's the argument that's being made in the appeal that's pending before the Supreme Court. And, hopefully action is taken on that from my perspective, just in terms of a sheer civil libertarian argument. But Virginia Giuffre, again, who spawned this entire thing, essentially, she wasn't even called as a witness in that trial. Why? Because her credibility would have been ripped to shreds upon cross-examination, which she had never been before subjected to. There were 4 women who were called to testify. And I admit, at the time, I was sort of like peripherally aware of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. I wasn't covering it in huge depth. I was becoming increasingly suspicious of some of the outlandish claims that were being made, but it was not a huge focus of mine. But having now read a lot of the transcripts and filled in some of the gaps in my knowledge, it's it's incredible. I mean, one of the 4 purported victims was, by everyone's admission, by the admission of the judge, the prosecution, and the defense, an adult at the time that the purported sex trafficking offenses took place. Or the jury was instructed that they could not convict Maxwell on the basis of any sexual activity that occurred with this one particular woman. Another one of the 4 victims, there's under cross-examination, or it might have been under direct examination, actually, was talking about how she's a schizophrenic and she hears voices in her head telling her that her children now are going to be sex trafficked. I mean, a lot of these purported victims did come from troubled backgrounds, no doubt about it. I mean, they had drug problems, they had unstable family lives. That's for sure. But they all got so when Epstein died, there was this Epstein Victims Compensation Fund that was set up through lawyers in conjunction with the Epstein estate. And to get the biggest possible payout, these purported victims were encouraged to, craft their stories in such a way that it would eventually aid prosecutors in prosecuting Ghislaine Maxwell, who was essentially treated as the proxy for Epstein because Epstein was dead, right? And the government had poured a lot of resources for the preceding 9 months into re-prosecuting Epstein.
Yeah.
And so the 4 women on trial got millions of dollars from this for crafting a story that was most conducive to the prosecution's goals.
Yeah, while being anonymous. Yeah.
While anonymous, which is insane. So, look, I'm not saying that Ghislaine Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein were,
and those 1,000 victims were anonymous too.
Every possible offense.
Those 1,000 victims were anonymous too, right? That's also crazy.
Well, the 1,000 victims thing is weird because we know like that there are hundreds of victims who applied to these various settlement funds that were established and received payouts. So you have the Epstein Compensation Fund, which derived from Epstein's estate once he was dead. You have the J.P. Morgan settlement, which was a staggering $290 million that J.P. Morgan agreed to as a class action settlement. And you had a Deutsche Bank settlement for $75 million. So, of course, everybody would come out the woodwork. I mean, if I had the most tangential connection to Epstein, I would probably come out of the woodworks and create and like conjure up a claim that would entitle me to millions of dollars without cross-examination. And I could do so, quote, confidentially, meaning there was no downside risk to me.
Yeah, you take no hit for it. Yeah, I mean, I do too. We should all try to get in on it. Honestly, yeah,
exactly. So I'm not sure where this claim of thousands of victims comes from.
Because you said that you were 14 while this was going on, right? So maybe you could say that you were like a little boy flown out to the island or something. I don't know.
No, I know people online are telling me like, maybe you're on the Epstein list or maybe you visited the island. I'm like, I wish that would have been awesome. I wish I had flown with Bill Clinton in 2002 to the Virgin Islands. But I didn't, sadly. Yeah, so I'm not sure where this like figure of thousands comes from. That's in the memo. It could be that Epstein also possessed material that could be seen as child pornography,
right?
But that he didn't necessarily create or something. I mean, it's hard to know
because a thousand's a lot
comes from.
Yeah, and but
I don't know where that figure comes from. I think that I think we need a little bit more specificity as to like what that derives from.
Yeah, I tried to fact check it, and I was able to find all these news outlets that are talking about it. But I'm like,
who are getting money for this, we're not even. They don't even have to claim that they were minors when the supposed offense occurred to them. They can simply claim that they were given a quote false promise, meaning that they were therefore illicitly coerced into engaging in some kind of sexual activity with Epstein. And actually, there's so many wrinkles to this. Virginia Giuffre, who's now deceased, which, by the way, just adds fuel to the fire for people who want to believe like maximalist versions of the story, because of course they're going to believe that she was suicided or she was killed like after 10 plus years of making the most grandiose claims. Like, I don't know why anybody would bother to kill her in April of 2025 after she spent the previous 10 years rattling off every accusation under the sun and making millions of dollars from it. But she was actually also accused by other purported victims of actually being one of the sex traffickers, because when she was an adult, she would reportedly recruit other girls or other, women in the same age bracket to come to Epstein's estate, where, they would be given, $300 for some kind of massage, where they would get like all, luxurious amenities, etc. So she was accused of being herself a sex trafficker.
I think casting doubt on the victims, I said already, it is very suspicious that you could do this anonymously, or that someone with a high profile like her got so much money and then has also been shown to be a liar in certain cases. And I talked about how this is, I'm very well aware this is not new. Norman Finkelstein's The Holocaust Industry and the lawsuits against the Swiss banks or whatever wasn't in Vienna, whatever banks those were. Mm-hmm. It's like those kinds of victim fund settlement schemes, like that's a thing. I totally get that. But there's like the bigger, it's like if we zoom out from details and just go with what we know for sure, there's still so much here that's wrong. Like this guy went from being a teacher at some school with just a working class guy, supposedly, to then being a billionaire who's flying around with all of these, like Bill Gates, Clinton, Prince Andrews, etc. And so it's like just that alone is something. But then also So the DOJ and the FBI, they conduct this comprehensive analysis of materials. I think that, by the way, the fact that this is coming from the DOJ and FBI maybe puts a hole in a lot of the conspiracy theories, right? Because you would think that the DOJ and FBI would have done a comprehensive analysis and said, oh, actually, there's not really that much. But instead, they come out and say that there's 1,000 victims, which is then it's like, so are you then going to do a conspiracy theory where you say that actually, no, the FBI is making this up, right? But that's a lot of victims, and the idea is that they were being what Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted for was grooming people to take them out to the island, and for what? And so it's for setting them up, not with Epstein. He didn't abuse over 1,000 people directly. It's for other people. And then I don't know anything about this one. I don't know how to fact check this one, and so it's probably just made up. But then there is the whole thing about cameras on the island and all the files on the island and the FBI losing the files. They lost all these files from the island. I don't know anything about that, but I want to, right?
Yeah. So
but that's the thing is I want a independent investigation. I don't know what that would mean, right? One that doesn't involve oversight, maybe from the FBI and CIA, but there has to be some kind of an investigation where people who aren't embedded in these networks are able to go through everything. I want a comprehensive analysis done by someone who's not the FBI.
And what body would that be?
I don't know. Yeah.
So here's what the memo says. Consistent with prior disclosures, this review confirmed that Epstein harmed over 1,000 victims. Each suffered unique trauma. Now, I don't know what that means exactly. Notice they say harmed rather than sexually assaulted or raped, right? So there could have been people like, several degrees removed that could claim that they were inflicted with some kind of psychological harm, right? I don't know, like a parent to one of the purported victims or a friend, it's hard to know what's even being referred to there.
Actually,
if there was some investigative body that could be set up that could just extract the ultimate truth about every aspect of this, I'd be all in favor of it. But I do think people tend to sort of weirdly discount the fact that there's been 10 years of hugely intensive investigation. There's been 10 years where, every journalistic outlet has attempted, at least since 2018, to come up with the bombshell story on this. Netflix documentaries, YouTube series, podcasts out the wazoo, newspaper series, magazine articles. There's been litigation from every which way on this, which people can go find. I mean, there's been Inspector General reports from the Bureau of Prisons, Inspector General reports about the DOJ's creation of the original non-prosecution agreement. There have been SEC reports about how Epstein got certain of his financial backing from being this sort of enigmatic money manager for different billionaires. There's been a million.
We're going to come right back after this, folks. We'll be right back. TU have clear on several actually become as those who have already contributed via donations for the TU studio. It's going to happen no matter what, but the question is when. If you want to help speed up the process, make things smoother sailing, and help me keep creating the kinds of content that you love, and even better, the kinds of content that is to come. There's a whole new era getting rolled out. If you want to help make it possible and usher it in smoother and faster, the best way to do that is to make a donation via the Zelle link up on the screen here. You see that QR code? Use that QR code. Once you have an account, that QR code should take you to where you can make the bank transfer with zero charge, which is really sweet, huh? Yeah, we love that. That's why we're using Zelle. Thank you so much for helping make this possible. And we're back. Sorry, we were just talking about ways of touching grass and interfacing with the public.
Well, one thing I try to do occasionally is go to like a wrestling, small, like lower profile, like wrestling matches.
Yeah.
Like not WWE, but like these
MMA.
I forget. Wait, what's the term now? No, not MMA. It's like professional wrestling, but like local organizations. You know.
Yeah, it's like I want to start going to more of these jujitsu tournaments. You know.
You're talking about.
Yeah. They're like parents, you know, and they're more like regular people. And I was just saying, I feel like I get to touch grass with those people a lot more just doing the farmers market, you know. It's and I was encouraging you. You got to do it. You got to do it, Michael. Michael, you got to pick up wood carving or something, some way of being there.
You're right. The thing is, if you go to a farmers market around here, like in New York City.
Oh, geez.
You're really touching grass. Like I would rather go to one in northern Idaho.
Yeah. We'll have to have you out here then. That'll be the way. Okay, and because we'll talk the rest of the time.
I've been to northern Idaho. Is Sandpoint? Are you around there?
Yeah, very close.
We're south of Sandpoint.
Okay, yeah, I've been to Sandpoint.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like a half hour from us. Yeah. Okay, and some of your thoughts on the way out here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think my closing thoughts is that it is frustrating to me that you are getting as attacked as you are, because I think we need, like, for real, I think in things like this, we need kind of this level-headed, rational perspective. I think, you know, both sides of this have really interesting points and things to say, but especially in the wake of you, like, I can't help but think of like the satanic panic and kind of the hysteria that comes from that. And we go, oh, actually, yeah, like a whole bunch of people were through one means or another given like these false memories. So that's also not entirely out of the picture when it comes to, oh, there's thousands of victims. It's like, well, where are these victims coming from? If you look at like the kind of Me Too-ification of society as well, like I think we have to be skeptical of stuff like this. I think the part of the whole Epstein thing that is the most interesting to me is, or even not the most interesting, but I think as Dave was talking about when like referring to Benjamin Studebaker, is like, he's like, oh, this is a distraction, it doesn't matter that much. But it's like, to normal working people, especially conservatives, it matters a lot. And I see a lot of, the first time, like in my own life, a lot of conservatives actually being critical of something that Trump has done, like defending every single thing he's done. And this kind of being the thing that maybe breaks the spell that, oh, Trump is so good and is going to save the country. And so I don't know what will come of this, because I think, like, in terms of upcoming midterm elections and presidential elections and how this distrust, like, I think a lot of people did not show up for the Democratic Party that would have in the past, but how is this going to alter trust of the Republican Party when you look at, like, you know, a tweet from Vance from like 2021 or 2020 pulled up or something saying, we will get to the bottom of this. This administration has the list. We want to, like, whatever it was just something that is so contradictory. And so in terms of, you know, radically changing the, or if not radically changing, I think waking normal American people up to, no matter what's going on, like, these guys are not good. Trump's not a good guy. He's not looking out for anyone's best interest. However, to whatever extent he was involved with Epstein, it's like, yeah, I think this is making a lot of people go, oh, Trump is also in the part of the swamp and shouldn't be trusted.
I just wish that if people are going to have an epiphany around this, it would be more along the lines of recognizing that manipulative tactics are used on them to galvanize them into voting for one of the two major political parties, right? So they're fed this scintillating Epstein sort of tidbits and teased with these revelations that are just around the corner if only you vote for Trump and Vance. And that this was an effective tactic to reach certain demographics, like I was mentioning earlier, that are not going to be amenable to ordinary political messaging. That's what I thought. That's what I would hope people would have a revelation around. But if they're going to have the revelation be that, oh, Trump is now in on the cover up of these massive child sex trafficking rings, I'm just not sure how productive that is. So there's an irony here that this is like the straw that broke the camel's back for people. And it's like maybe like the least rational straw to break the camel's back, or like one that I'm not sure is going to lead to any kind of more enlightened understanding of American politics. And you mentioned Me Too. That's another interesting thing here that I think is under examined, which is that I thought the right tended to be the most skeptical of Me Too, right? They would be willing to like weaponize it against liberal and left antagonists because Me Too, when it first erupted, tended to disproportionately affect left and liberal kind of segments of society like Hollywood or the media, etc. So, but like in terms of the sort of epistemology of Me Too, where anybody can just kind of claim to be a survivor or claim to be a victim, and then we have to believe women, right? I mean, that has been mocked for years
Or
by
believe
people on the
victims.
right, by people on the right, and yet, the Epstein thing, to the extent that it exploded into like an object of societal fascination, that happened because the energies of Me Too were harnessed behind it. Like you said, you only heard about Epstein in 2019. I had heard about it, I think, beginning in 2014 or 2015 when Virginia Giuffre made her court filing, filed her claims pursuant to that ongoing litigation, and made these fantastical allegations. But she wasn't seen as particularly. They were seen as like too fantastical to be that credible. And then it kind of percolated out in the ether. And then in 2018, the Miami Herald releases this series on Epstein. It explodes in public notoriety, and it harnesses the cultural energy of Me Too to do so. And this is like one area where people are like just willing to countenance Me Too on the right because they thought eventually it would expose like satanic Democrats or something.
Where do you think he got his money or his connections? Where do you think he got it from? Like that was the question I brought up before.
Yeah, I mean, look,
like that isn't that like you said you were on the it's suspicious bandwagon, and now but now it sounds like you're not, and it's just like I get the way it's been weaponized. I get the way that the right uses it. Sure, but what's not suspicious about the Epstein situation? Just because a bad witness gets centered, like to me, like, well, the conspiracy could easily go so deep that they pay her to be a lying witness. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's so many weird things about the whole situation. We don't really. How can we know anything? Right? Like the real question here is like, it's plausible. Like there's so much plausibility to the larger claims being made that the facts or the characters matter very little, right?
I mean, I agree that there are weird aspects to the Epstein saga. There always have been. But do you know how every like shady money manager has made their money and like put it, I mean, with offshore accounts? I mean, did you ever read the what was the name of those papers now? I'm trying to remember. There was like a whole...
Are you saying that he was a money manager?
That was part of how he generated his income, yes. That's what's in the record as far as I know. I'm not saying that explains like every little component of his wealth. But yeah, I mean, he was... I'm just not like... what. So are people like asserting that rather than accumulating wealth by shady means, what we're to believe that like the CIA and Mossad collaborated with him to blackmail powerful people, and that's how he generated his wealth. I don't know. I mean, I guess you would just need evidence for that claim, and there's not a whole lot of evidence for it. There is evidence that he was like a shady money manager. Like, I'm not an expert. I'm not like fully fluent in like all this lingo around how shady money managers accumulate their fortunes. But like, there's got to be like a million other people like Epstein who have such fortunes whose full scope can't be like explained by a layperson. And is that scandalous in a way? Sure, it's scandalous, like in the way that Wall Street is itself scandalous, you know. But I'm not sure that substantiates the theories that people have around this. Like, if people want to do a full forensic audit of how he accumulated every last dollar of his wealth, I'm all in favor of that. There has been some of that, but I'm just not sure like what that question is supposed to lead to. It's supposed to lead to an assumption of the child sex trafficking ring and blackmail operation having been existent. I don't know. I mean, if people want to believe that, look, I know that there's psychic gratification that people get by believing that. Like, people want to believe everybody's a pedophile, essentially. It's kind of a useful way to simplify world events into like a comprehensible framework for people. And there are instances of illicit sexual behavior going on in elite circles, but I don't know. I just find it to be a little bit of a red herring.
But like, nobody is going to go to jail. Nobody is going, no billionaire, president, prince, or anybody is going to go to jail for this. They're not even going to spend a day in court. Like, that's crazy. Is that not crazy? Like, shouldn't they?
They've been in court. They've been sued out the wazoo. Prince Andrew had to agree to.
Yeah, you said he settled on it. Yeah,
$14 million.
Yeah, I guess they can always just settle out on it.
They weren't gonna. They couldn't, because they weren't going to just have him endure like the insane PR nightmare of standing trial in the United States on child sex trafficking charges. Billionaires have been sued. I mean, people have been sued. I'm not
should happen. Like, if there were people being sued is not what I'm talking. I'm talking about people going to prison. I'm talking about people going to prison. So you don't think
if there were evidence of that, anybody would have been charged?
Yeah, that's the part that's no. I don't. I'm not convinced that they would have been charged. Right? Why would I be convinced that they would have been charged? We didn't get to see the trial because one of the highest,
because like, you need evidence to bring charge. I mean, people have been charged. Ghislaine Maxwell was charged.
There's no shortage of evidence. There's evidence. Remember, missing.
The person who claims that there are all these uncharged people, prominent third-party people to whom that she was trafficked, was Virginia Giuffre, who's a serial fabulist, who prosecutors could not even call to testify.
No, but if the FBI, no. But if the FBI and DOJ is saying there's 1,000 victims, and Bill Gates and Trump and Clinton and Prince Andrews and other people were spending all this time out at the island, if Clinton was over 12 or 20 flights out there with Epstein in his plane, then it's just like, okay, well, we should be able to know. We should be able to know a bit more about what happened there.
Flights with Epstein,
right? But we should be able to know about this. Like, if they're going to say that there's 1,000 victims, as you've already pointed to, it's all very vague, like what kind of victims these are, right? Well, who's implicated? You know, this is the kinds of natural questions that come from this. But okay, I know
we have lists of who's been implicated.
We're not gonna solve it today, and I know we got to. We're over time now, and I do have to cut this off.
Hopefully,
I'll let you say.
Gives people.
I'll let you say your closing. I'll let you say your closing thoughts. I just want to say thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it, and so but I do got to run. So take it away.
My final thought, like in less than a minute, is I hope that this gives people a little bit of more context in terms of how to assess these claims that are floating around, especially if you're just kind of a lay person, not a fervent consumer of all news related to Epstein. and that maybe you can just conceptualize it in a slightly different way. Like, I'm not claiming I have all the answers. I'm not claiming that there aren't answers that could still be sought. I just think that the way that this functions in the popular consciousness has a lot of problems and leads a lot of people astray in
100%.
ways that are regrettable. So,
yeah, and now, as you've pointed out, the Trump administration kind of has to lay in the bed that it's helped make, right?
yeah, something like that.
All right. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. Have a good rest of your day.
All right. Take care, guys.
Take care.
Subscribers get
Thank
access
you.
to all past courses at Theory Underground, as well as ongoing courses taught by David McKerracher, Benjamin Studebaker, and Nina Power. Subscribers also get access to monthly research seminars, and the higher tiers of involvement unlock discussions and one-on-one small group tutelage. So if you're like me and you're never a huge bookish kind of person, but somewhere along the way you got really into listening to educational materials, if you got really into listening to podcasts and then books at work, if you love going deep into ideas, but you're just not a traditional bookish kind of person, well, this is where the alliance between people like us and people who are more bookish and specialized are able to meet to work through these things and do so in defense of the humanity and our intellectual integrity. This is not a place where we're going to kick you out because you're pro-life or pro-choice, or where you are an atheist or a agnostic or a Christian. But it is a place where you're expected to love one another regardless of such things, and to show up for people in your actual IRL real life communities regardless of such things. And if that is exciting for you, and if you're excited to learn about what this approach, this method, this school of thought has to offer, then I'm excited to meet you. Subscribe today.